this evening. And we are going to be hearing from next from the couple of gentlemen who are running for the Republican nomination for the 1st District in Congress. The winner of that nomination is going to be going up against David Wu. And we're going to first hear from Rod Cornilles. If you're ready to go, sir. Very good. Please give a hand for Rod Cornilles.
So right before we went to that commercial break, we just heard that news from Massachusetts that Scott Brown has been declared the winner. Who would have thunk it just 2 weeks ago? Look how far we've come. You know, a lot of people have said that over the years that Oregon is kind of the Massachusetts of the West Coast. I'd like to announce that tonight, Oregon will be the Massachusetts of the West Coast. You know, as remarkable as that victory is, I think those of us who are like-minded, who believe that that government is not better than the people in governing itself, that government doesn't have more ideas than the people, that government isn't the answer to our ails in all cases, but rather, when we put the power back to the people, great things happen. And I think we all feel that intuitively. That's how I was raised, with that kind of conservative thinking. It doesn't mean that I discard government. I see a place and a role for government. But tonight, I think our country, as represented by, historically, a state that usually turns to government for their solutions, our country is saying, enough is enough. It's time to put the power back to the people and let us solve our problems. I want to let you know why I'm running for Congress in the 1st Congressional District here in Oregon. I have 3 sons. They're ages 20, 16, and 13. My wife Allison is here with me tonight, and we have been married almost 24 years. We're both born and raised in Oregon. And my youngest son was watching a television program with me last spring. And in that particular program on the news, they were discussing the deficit spending that our country is going through right now. And of course, we couldn't even fathom at that time what it would be here 12 months later. And it was a very sobering story. It was almost depressing. And I didn't think my 12-year-old was paying much attention. And as it went to a commercial, we muted it, and he asked me this simple question. He said, "Dad, am I going to have to pay for all that?" Now, that's a question that at first makes us chuckle, but then if you are a parent or a grandparent or a great-grandparent, it's probably also a question that makes you pause and recognize the seriousness of it. That my perceptive, insightful little 12-year-old recognized that we adults weren't acting like adults. And what we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months in our country, emanating in Congress, and almost being encouraged by an administration, is really my kids' version of taxation without representation. Their voice is not being heard in what's happening today. And so several months ago, that's when I decided, as a business owner in Tualatin, who's had a business for 15 years, started it out of our home, and today we are the world leaders in that which we do for our particular industry. I decided that as much fun as I was having in my business, and quite frankly, it's something that I wished to retire doing, I have to do more. Because I'm an Oregonian. Yes, I'm a Republican. I'm running in the Republican race. I've never been a Democrat. I've never been an independent. But first and foremost, I'm an Oregonian. And I was born and raised with Oregon DNA. What does that mean? That means that I recognize that to be a true Oregonian, you reflect the values, the principles, the grit of the ancestors who formed this part of the country. We're in Clatsop County, which is probably one of the greatest signs of ingenuity and pioneering spirit this country's ever seen. Because the people who came all the way to Clatsop County to settle these parts were the hardest working, the most driven, perhaps the most ambitious people the country produced back then. They didn't look over their shoulders asking, when's the government going to come help us? They got their fingers dirty. They got the dirt under their fingernails. That's in my ancestry, and for those of you who grew up in this area, it's in your ancestry as well. And I think it's a disservice to my children and their children to teach them through government policy and legislation that if they wait long enough, someone else is going to take care of you. Now, I believe we have to take care of each other. Those are also Oregon values. People want to look after their neighbors. And I think I have experience in my life being both the giver of that care and also the recipient of it. I'm grateful to it. I'm grateful that I can say that's an Oregon value. And that's why I'm so charged up to make sure that as a congressman, I recognize and will act so that the problems that we're facing in Oregon, we know we can fix best if left to Oregonians, not bureaucrats 3,000 miles away. They do not understand our psyche. And unfortunately, we have representation in Congress for the last almost 12 years from this particular district who I don't think understands us. He doesn't represent our views, as evidenced by the fact that he votes with Nancy Pelosi 98.6% of the time. She represents San Francisco, as you know. You tell me, Warrenton, are you San Francisco? No. Is Washington County, Hillsborough, is that San Francisco? Is Newburgh or McMinnville in Yamhill County, is that San Francisco? Of course it's not. And so I am running for Congress because I want to represent you, not dictate to you my ideology and my partisanship. That's the true nature and definition of a representative. And so sometimes I'm here to say tonight, as a representative, I may do things that not everybody in this district agrees with. But that's part of the hard part of being an elected official. If we all thought the same, this would not be Oregon. If we all thought the same, Clatsop County would be a much different place. We appreciate, sometimes we enjoy the diversity of this county and this district. My job is to best understand your interests, best understand what you want for your future, for your employees, for your companies, for your neighbors, for your kids, for your grandkids, and then do things that will help you get to that end result. I've done it in my business, I've done it hopefully with my family, and I have my character witness here tonight if you'd like to find out if that's true. And hopefully through continued dialogue and discussion with you, you will come to be convinced that I am the best person not only to represent you, but also to win back this seat, which Republicans have not owned for 35 years. And may I also say in closing, 1 year ago today, we had a new president elected to office and inaugurated. Inaugurated on January 19th, 2009. Who would have thought that 1 year later, we would see such a sea change starting with Massachusetts? We have to do our job now in Oregon. We cannot rest on our laurels. We cannot feel that all of this is inevitable. We have to get to work. We have to articulate our principles in a better way so that people who currently don't share our beliefs finally understand that fiscally conservative principles are what will finally produce jobs and prosperity for Oregonians, especially here in the 1st District. I'm excited for the challenge. I hope to have your support along the way, and thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you.
Hi, that was, for those who are on the radio, just tuning in, Ron Cornilles. He's running for the 1st District Congressional seat, currently held by Democrat David Wu. Not a lot of Democrats in the room tonight, are there? Anywhere? No?
They might be just quiet.
Just quiet. Okay. So you quiet guys out there, you must be D's, huh? We're going to move along here with our lineup. We also want to thank the folks at the Serendipity Cafe for providing the space for this time. Very nice. Try the turkey wrap, it's delicious. Just a little push there. Next up, again, congressional candidate, Republican running for the 1st District, John Kuzmanich. Please welcome him.
Thank you all for allowing me this opportunity to speak. First off, I'd like to say I was thrown a little bit by the Massachusetts results. I'm so excited. I'm a member of Americans for Prosperity, and all of the hard work we've all put in, gosh, from the town halls to the tea parties. This is amazing to watch. We don't have the White House. We don't hold a majority in either houses of Congress, and yet the will of the people is strong and alive in America. And I think this is transcending partisan politics. Obviously, in Massachusetts, it's registration's 9-1 in favor of Democrats, and they're voting with their conscience. They're voting with the people. They don't like what our government's doing. To introduce myself, my name is John Kuzmanich, and I am the owner and president of U.S. Nationwide Mortgage, a residential commercial finance company located in Beaverton. And as they said, I am running against David Wu for the United States Congress. I would give you more of my bio. My background is economics, and as I said, my experience is in banking, finance, mortgages, housing, budgeting, all of the things that ail us. But I was actually asked here to talk a little bit about my contrast to David Wu. They asked me two things that are different about me, and I have to say, ideologically, we're night and day. It's not two things. I could go on and on. David Wu and many in Salem, as well as now our national federal government, believe government is the answer and the solution to our problems. They believe more government, bigger deficits, more power and control to them will somehow answer all the problems that ail us. I don't believe that. I believe we the people are the strength of this country and always have been. 90% of the jobs are in the private sector, and if you want us to grow, prosper, and create new jobs, you've got to get off our backs, which means remove, lower taxes, deregulation, I mean, on and on, exactly the opposite of what David Wu stands for. But the two things that I picked to focus on would be the economy and jobs. And David Wu has voted for the stimulus bill. I would never have. The bailout bill. Who in here got a bailout, by the way? Anybody? Were those banks that were too big to fail? Anyone? Nothing. Me neither. I have to tell you honestly, if those banks were allowed to fail, nothing would have changed. Those banks, that stimulus bill was a slush to give the money back to the banks so the politicians can be rewarded. The banks were propped up. None of us were. Our housing market is still a mess. Nothing was answered, and now we have a debt that's been hoisted onto our children and our futures, which will basically be taxes for the future. And that was the answer to our problems. And we see it in Salem with Measure 66 and 67. Increased taxes, more control of the government. They need to reduce taxes. It's tried and true. I studied it my entire life, the historical data. Everything I've studied in textbooks on economics state that you need to reduce taxes in order to grow the private sector. The government doesn't create anything. They only transfer wealth. As the government is larger, we the people, the private sector is smaller. If you want growth, jobs, and prosperity, you shrink the government and we prosper and grow. If they wouldn't have bailed those banks out, small businesses like myself, and I own a mortgage bank, would have jumped in, created destruction, and would have done it right and built up and started providing new jobs. And that's how it would have worked. And instead they propped up the exact system in the banks that failed. And they claimed that was a solution to the problem. It wasn't. The second issue that I'd like to speak on is health care. The health care bill. Before I ever decided to run for Congress, I was at the town halls, before they even caught fire. I got into 2 out of 4 or 5 I was at, and I got questions off to David Wu. And in one of them, I specifically asked him, you're nationalizing everything. The manufacturing base, the automobile companies through the manufacturing base, the insurance companies, the banks, and now healthcare. You're taking over nearly 20% of our economy. And you're doing it so quickly, it makes us all very uncomfortable. If you know that the people, David Wu, if you know the people out there in your district, the majority don't want this bill and don't want this, will you vote for it anyways? And he stared at us all in the room and told me to my face and all of us and said, I'll do what I want and I'll explain it to you later. And there was a condescending tone to that we weren't capable of understanding this and he would be able to explain it to us. And then he said, and I gotta tell you, it was actually a 10-minute answer, so I'm condensing it for everybody's ears here because it was almost unbearable. But then he went on to say that if you don't like it, you can vote me out. And at that point, I decided to run against this guy. And I was flabbergasted they would say that. And in the exact same town hall, on another level, which is very dear to my heart, the United States Constitution, a gentleman asked him, healthcare, how do you justify it constitutionally? The 10th Amendment states if it's not explicitly enumerated in the Constitution, it falls to the states and the people to decide. And this is an issue we see with a lot of issues right now that are running through Congress. And David Wu justified it by quoting the Constitution. he actually went to Article 1, Section 8, the Commerce Clause, and he stated that that allowed him the right. Well, I have to tell you, I've looked at the Constitution. Amendment number 9 states, you can't take one part of the Constitution to override another. He's violating the 10th Amendment by quoting the First Amendment, and by doing that, he violates the 9th Amendment that explicitly says you can't do that. Healthcare is unconstitutional, and I find it very telling that he chooses to violate and has to justify using the Constitution what he's doing. I found that distasteful, especially from an individual who is sworn to uphold the Constitution. That said, government can try to reform healthcare, reduce the costs, tort reform, get the lawyers, which over 90% of them back to Democrats, get them out from between us and our doctors, allow people to compete across state lines to reduce the costs, and then we could look again at the healthcare situation. But a government takeover is a power grab, and David Wu supports these things. As my opponent in the primary just mentioned, nearly 98% of the time David Wu votes as a Democratic lackey. He's not a leader. He votes with Nancy Pelosi. That's not leadership. It's not what we need here in Oregon, and I won't provide that. I'm a man of action. The reason I'm running for Congress is my father came here from a communist country. He worked hard, he served in the United States Marines, and he taught me a love of this country that I absolutely have carried with me my entire life. He taught me that if you work hard, you can achieve the American dream, the American promise. And I did what he said. And I worked hard. I provided jobs. I put my nose to the grindstone. I saved my pennies. I opened up a company. And for the last 3 years, I've been under assault by my economy, my government, taxes, and regulation, to the point that I had to stand up and fight. I had to stand up and do something. I love this country, and I don't want to see it slip away. So this is my service. So it was a call to action. My fight or flight response kicked in, and if it's worth fighting for, and I absolutely believe this country is, I fight. That's why I'm running for Congress. I sometimes use the analogy, if those of you know the Israeli Defense Force out there, everyone in Israel for 2 years serves in the military, men and women. If they have to go to total war, the country shuts down for 3 weeks. Completely shuts down. They can fight a total war for only 3 weeks. They can fight a limited war longer. The reason they do this is because if they lose their country, all else is lost. So they stop what they're doing and turn their attention to the job at hand. I'm turning away from my business and my personal life, for which I enjoy, and I'm going out there to fight on behalf of us, we the people of the United States of America, and this is my service to my country. And I think that's what I see in these groups, Americans for Prosperity, the Tea Party, the 9/12 people, all of the freedom and liberty groups out there are turning their attention away from their families and their private lives and standing up against politicians of either party that are out of touch with the will of the American people and no longer properly represent us. I plan on representing us properly. If you want to find out any more about me, you can go to www.kuzforcongress, that's KUZFOR Congress.com, and I want to thank you all for listening.
You know, neither one of you guys make it in Congress. You got great jobs in radio, I think. What terrific voices. I'm Tom Friel. We're broadcasting live from the Serendipity Cafe.
40 years from now. But in any case, it ramps up so that gradually businesses will not be able to emit carbon dioxide and in gradual steps up until that for the next 40 years. And what that means is that for those that are, say, let's take a coal plant, which produces coal production now produces.
Even though it wasn't posed to me. Thank you. I'd just like to address this because cap and trade is obviously a bill that went through Congress, specifically the House, last summer. And our Congressman David Wu voted on it. He voted yes. It has not been brought to the Senate floor yet. In fact, the Senate version is basically sitting on some back table now, thankfully. When he was asked at a Sherwood town hall, which our family attended, why he voted on cap and trade, he responded, even though he admitted he had not read it, he responded, "I vote my conscience." I don't know how you vote your conscience to something you've never read, a content you don't understand. I'd like to add a few things to what Art said and give him an amen to those remarks. one of the things that I really abhor about this legislation is that it essentially picks winners and losers in industry. Because many big corporations, and yes, I'm saying big corporations, I agree with the comments earlier by Rich, not all corporations are bad, in fact, very few are. But it basically allowed certain corporations in this country to prepare for the cap and trade bill so that they could basically have say or sway over other companies who they could sell their caps to. It literally picked winners and losers behind closed doors, a practice we have seen a lot of lately in the healthcare debate. The other reason I find this bill unconscionable is because the proponents claim it is to, quote, clean up the environment. But let's just imagine this. If America subscribes to the cap and trade legislation, it's as if my family and I pick up all of our litter in our home, collect all the garbage, put it in a big hefty bag, take it out in the backyard, walk to the fence, and drop it into the neighbor's yard. And then we say, our house is clean. Because that's what it will do. It will effectively move, quote-unquote, pollution overseas to other companies that are not restricted in any such legislation. So if you're talking about cleaning the environment, the globe, this is a sham. That's not what it will do. It will effectively limit the growth opportunity of American business, which means it will limit your opportunity to prosper. And I might add, in this particular district, with so much agriculture, with so much industry, right here and even in Clatsop County, the mills, the fisheries, etc., they use energy to a great extent. It would significantly strangle their businesses because of the energy tax they would have to pay. This is the wrong time for this bad legislation. If there ever is a time, this is the wrong time for this bad legislation with the economy as we see it here in Oregon. And I think my friend John has a comment.
Well, first off, thankfully, that bill's dead, as is a lot of the other things that we're seeing the left do. You know, we had the Copenhagen and the climate treaty that all failed. Cap and trade is this. To make it simple, they're putting a cap on how much pollution we can do. If you're over it, you got to pay. And if you're under it, you get credits, and you can sell it to the other people. The whole point is to limit how much we pollute. If carbon dioxide is even a pollutant, we all exhale it regularly, so it's questionable science to begin with. What they're attempting to do, which is confusing to me, because if you want to prosper and grow, and we're a growing nation, you know, every year we add more and more people, and if you want to prosper, you got to be able to fuel your energy needs. And it doesn't make any sense as a policy to try to cap how much energy we produce and to tell us to use less and less. As Americans, that's not the way we operate. And as the other gentleman mentioned, it is detrimental to specific industries like the coal industry throughout the Appalachians and in the Midwest. It's harmful to them as they emit carbon dioxide. But the truth of the matter is, what it ends up doing is when they pay, they don't pay. These businesses don't pay. They pass it on to every one of us, and your electricity bills skyrocket. And our president even went out and said as much. He said that's part of the deterrent to make you not use as much energy, which is just, you know, it's a bizarre approach, and it's anti-capitalistic, it's anti-American, and then of course it will push jobs and companies overseas. But I don't think we have to worry, because it looks like it's dead in the water, and it is on the back burner now. And I think the 2010 elections, what we're all looking forward to, is going to weigh heavily on the Democrats. And cap and trade is a non-starter at this point. That's my feeling. But we were just talking, Richard. We got to keep the pedal down on everything because the Democrats will adapt and continue to press them on everything. Our victories here, and continue to look for more. And it looks like 2010 is going to be a banner year, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks. You know,
It's known around here for bringing little bags of money here and there. That's his claim to fame. Never a whole lot, but he's consistent in bringing it in, and agencies and organizations depend on that. They count on it. How will you counter that?
Okay, well, to start, that's indicative again of government is the solution. That's kind of that's a familiar tactic. That's a Chicago style. You get people on the dole. You can take away the money, or you can give them more. I think that the best way to counteract that is to let people keep more of their money to start with. It doesn't need to be taken from government and filtered back through them.
So I would say that my approach is very much, I would like to address another question here. You know, Rob and I sit up here, and obviously we're running on the same party banner, but you know, we have similar stances on a lot of things, but I would think, you know, we have a primary